I'm Bobby. This is Aaron.
Yo.
Yo, and so today we are going to give you a little insight into what we personally consider to be the top 10 right-hand drive cars that we have ever heard of. Maybe there are some we haven't heard of that are cooler, but probably
Personal
not.
favorites.
Yeah, personal favorites. So, yeah, we're going to give you that list, kind of give you a few little specs and reasons why we feel that way. And, yeah, just kind of feel it out. So I'll start out with our number 10, which is the Evo 9 MR. Yeah, so that was available in the United States, and even so, it's still just it's on our list for multiple reasons. So I'll start off, and Aaron, you can chime in with anything you think I'm leaving out or anything that you have to add, right?
Yeah.
Word. So, as most people know, there was the Evo, 1 through 10 in Japan. We only got the Evo 8, 9, and 10 here in the U.S.
Oh, yeah. Missed out.
So, just a little rundown. The Evo 1 through 9 had the 4G63, and the Evo 9 specifically had the MyVec portion of that motor, which was the first Evo to come with the MyVec. So
The MyVec, is that like their VTEC?
yeah, pretty much.
Right.
It's
Their
variable valve timing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also the Evo 9 MR came with the 6-speed manual as opposed to the 5-speed, which if you're an Evo guy, then you know that really wasn't even a good thing, because about time you strap that 35R on there, that 6-speed was dropping out of the bottom. So it was, the 5-speed was just a little more bulletproof, and then you can obviously send those out to get some more. But, all-wheel drive, of course, and, the Evo period was, Mitsubishi's entry into the rally scene.
Big time.
So if you're kind of into all-wheel drive turbo cars, and you know all about the Evo.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
all day.
And I've personally had a few. The Evo 9 MR being the favorite one that I've personally had. Just they got everything right with that car, in my opinion, from the exterior styling to the interior bits that they upgraded, those leather Recaros that they had in the Evo 9 MR. The upgraded sound system, everything in that car, in my opinion, for at the time, a $30,000 to $40,000 car. That thing that had everything. So,
It was nice.
Yeah, and of course the aftermarket support was all there. Regardless of what you were looking for, I know Force Performance ended up making those FP Red, FP Green, all of those different bolt-on turbos for those cars. So, and with the 4G63 having history back to the first-gen Eclipses, I think that
all
really
the crank walk jokes.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, every manufacturer has its thing, right, that they're teased about or whatever. But all in all, I think, topping off this list at number 10, Evo's probably a solid choice.
Yeah.
So coming into number 9, what do you got?
I got the AE86 Corolla.
AE80, the Hachiroku.
The Hachiroku. So the AE86, it's definitely most known from the anime Initial D. And it was like the hero car in that, the little the tofu delivery car that the main character drove.
That's like that's like one of these. This is one of those type of cars that has like a cult following, right?
Right. Because on paper, like the car doesn't look like anything crazy. It's just a 1.6 liter 4-cylinder NA 5-speed.
But it's that drivetrain, right, that set it apart.
Right. It's rear-wheel drive.
Yeah.
So, and it's a really light car, so it made it really good for drifting. So, on the togeis and stuff in Japan, that's what you want. You want that light car that's nimble and,
Affordable.
quick to change directions, affordable.
Yeah.
Right, because, I mean, here in America, like back in, I don't know, mid 2000s or so, those cars were nothing. You could buy them for nothing. Like,
Yeah, nobody even
it's
cared
insane.
about those.
No one cared about them, because it was mid 80s Toyota Corolla. Like, who would pay money for this?
Yeah, most people would probably think it's ugly, boxy, just like.
Yeah, which, I mean, it kind of is,
Yeah.
but that's like what people love about them, and that's why it has such a cult following, is because of that, right? And I mean, and like I said, on paper, it's nothing special. It's got like a solid rear axle, which most of the time you don't want for a good handling car. You want the independent rear suspension, and it just doesn't have any, I don't know, anything crazy, I guess you could say. But that doesn't stop people from driving them. Like, they're really popular in the early days of D1, and people would do crazy swaps in them, like from rotaries, 13B rotaries, to I've seen a lot of SR swapped Corollas, for competition cars, just along those lines. And it's just easy to modify and
Right.
Yeah.
So
and cheap. Cheap at the
swaps
end of
were
the day.
popular though, because obviously that stock motor's not really getting you anywhere besides maybe some low speed like stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, on the Toge and stuff, that'd be cool, right? To have a lower powered that's way more nimble. But, right, for competition drifting, you would want a little bit more. That didn't stop people, though. There were a few drivers out there that had NA cars that did well, but it was a different style. And it was a
Right.
different time, And once times progressed, they kind of
Because the
needed the more.
speed and power became
Right.
more prevalent, so the AE86 either needed major upgrades or to just kind of be retired from that type of.
Right.
Yeah.
And they had different models, They had a coupe model. They had a hatchback model, which is probably most famous. The hatchback with the pop-up front end, pop-up headlights.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, definitely classic 80s look.
Yeah, I see people, with the auto, like, so it looks like it's blinking at you and shit.
Yeah, and, they also had a different front end that was also, I believe, the Levin front end was just like the regular type headlights. So within that one model, they had a few different little sub-models that changed the look of the car, and, people would take panels off of one and add to the other and kind of create their own look, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So number 9, the AE86 Hachiroku. So number 8, this one's you again. What do we got for number 8? The R33 GTR and all of its I don't
The
even
big girl,
submodels. Yeah,
R33.
yeah, the big girl. Yeah, the boat.
Yeah, so the R33, it's the middle child of the Skylines. It was the
Often less appreciated.
right, often less appreciated, but it still held its own in the time. It was definitely the next step above the R32 in terms of performance. The Nürburgring time was beat again by it. So definitely had the support there because they used the same drivetrain, same engine as the R32, just with a few little different things, like the crank collar, for instance, was fixed on the R33, and a little bit of issues with the transmission were fixed with the synchros and stuff. But for the most part, it was all the same, and it also had N1 models that followed the same as the R32, which was stripped down and more the race version.
Right, and they had but the R33s when they really started branching out and doing like some higher performance submodels.
Right, like the 400R. I'm sure everyone's heard of the 400R is one of them. Also the LM, which was like, they didn't make many of those at all. It was like a GT1 class homologation car, which meaning they had to make so many so it could race in the class.
So those are actually out there.
Yeah, they're out there, but 99% probably went to the racetrack. So who knows where they ended up?
They're probably like 100 $1,000 plus right now.
Oh yeah,
easy.
easily. I
Yeah.
mean, you probably can't even find them.
Right. Yeah. If you find
And if
one,
they
it's
do come for
insane.
sale,
Yeah.
Nismo probably buys them or
Right.
something like that, you know.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But they were pretty cool, you know. They were the LMs. They were rear wheel drive only. You know, they had this super big wide body on them that like was insane. Even a GTR is pretty wide, but like GT or the LM rather is
Yeah. It looks like a
even
race
wider.
car.
It's
Literally
crazy.
a race car. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it also came with a 6-speed. So that was another little
Right.
little
Because we never
switch up
got
they
the
had.
6-speed in the R33. Only once we get to the R34.
Right, right.
Yeah. So what about with the R33? What about didn't they have like a sedan?
Oh yeah, the Autech version.
The Autech.
And that's my personal favorite R33.
Yeah, we get it. Anything with a 4-door, you like it. Got it.
No, I mean it's just one of those things where it's like it's the only 4-door GTR that was ever produced from the factory. So, it had the wider fenders, it had the badging, it had the RB26 twin turbo. It had all that, but with 4 doors.
Yeah, the
So-
only thing I don't like that they did with that was keep the sedan taillights. Not a
yeah.
fan. If they had put the GTR rear end on that thing, it would just be nasty.
Right. They did change it up a little bit. They did like paint around them to try to
Yeah.
bring that in, but yeah, that
You
the
can just- it's the
R33 sedan, that's
yeah.
like
Not not cute.
but the Autech looks better than the base.
Oh, for sure.
the
Way
sedans.
better. Yeah. It's
The-
just like, dang, they just like ran out of
Definitely
money at the rear end.
mid-90s.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a cool car. And you don't see many of them. I think they only built around 400 and who knows where those went.
Right. So that's, even though it's a 4-door, some people would think that that would be kind of valued at less because of the sedan part. But since it was such low production and it's a GTR, it's worth more for sure than just
Right.
a regular coupe like a V-Spec.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, the R33 GTR, yeah, definitely a good car and continued that tradition of like, Nissan's quest for like having that, sports car during that era.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's number 8, the R33 GTR and all of its submodels. Number 7, S15 Sylvia.
Ooh.
This is you again.
Oh yeah. The S15 Sylvia is the latest and greatest of the Sylvia models. They were made from 99 to 2002. So the same era from all those great cars like the R34 and all that. So it definitely showed in it. They had 2 different models. They had a Spec R, which was like the turbo model. They also had a Spec S, which was NA. But both of those models had aero models, which had, different bumpers, fog lights, side skirts, rear bumper, all that. And
No
they also-
performance submodels then, just like cosmetic type.
Yeah, mostly. They also had an Autech version of that, but it was in a I think it was a 6-speed. I think that was the cool thing about it was it was in a 6-speed, but it's in a. It's not
Yeah.
that. But they also made a convertible version of that.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, the Varietta. And most of Nissans, when they were made into convertibles, they were sent off to a factory, and it was a coupe to start with, and they chopped the roof. The Varietta wasn't like that. The Varietta was its own like specific model.
Wow.
It wasn't sent off and
Just
chopped
yeah,
up like
yeah.
in that sense.
Wow, I
But,
didn't know that. So yeah, so it was a whole different assembly line kind of for that car.
Right, right. And the Sylvia had the SR20 DET, which is God's motor, some people say. I've had a few of those in my day, and that's definitely the engine to have. And the S15 above all, also has a 6-speed transmission option, which like you said with the Evos, the 6-speed, it's
Yeah.
probably not the strongest one, but it was a cool thing to see back then and to have. But 5-speed's probably a little bit stronger, a little more sought after. But it was still a cool thing to see.
So the S15 was the last of the Sylvias, right?
Oh yeah, it was the last of the Sylvias, and you know, one of the better ones. Out of all three of the later Sylvias, it was definitely the more advanced. It had a little bit of a bigger turbo. They had all the kinks worked out, and it was
Right. Yeah, like
it
the
was the
final
one
version.
kind of
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like, I mean, I know me personally, the S15 is like the most attractive to me, just body wise, just those
Right.
lines and like those headlights and even the taillights are all just like perfect. I mean, I love kooky. Is that how you say it? Kooky?
Yeah,
Kooky. I love
Kooky.
kooky S14s too. Those are
Right.
those are sweet. But yeah, the S15 for me was always like that. Like, wow, that thing's fucking nice.
Right. And yeah, I mean, it shares a bunch of the same parts as the S14 because the S14 they had it about figured out then.
Right.
So the S15 they share a lot of the same suspension and a lot of the same tech, as far as that goes. But it was just like not a facelift, but a little bit beyond that.
Yeah.
It was just brand new.
Yeah, I feel like the S15 is one of those cars that can still kind of hang with today's like design exterior wise.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, sure there's
Timeless.
there's some things that you're like, oh, okay, but otherwise just like it kind of can hang with them. So that's one thing that I always kind of noticed about is like, damn, that's like up to date.
Right. It wouldn't be out of place at a Nissan dealership today.
Right. Yeah. You'd just be like, oh, what's this like a few years ago? Yeah,
right.
it's definitely good. So number 7, the S15 Sylvia Spec R specifically is probably the
Spec R Aero is the one I would want personally.
yeah.
Just because
Did that come with the
it
big wing?
it came with a wing.
Yeah.
Pretty big, I guess.
It was
typical
like
size for back then.
the 3 mount, right?
Right.
Yeah. Those
It had
are
like
cool.
the triangle tail light in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are sweet.
Yeah, it was a cool car.
All right, so number 6, this one's me. In this one I hold near and dear to the heart because I've had a few, including the higher model, which is the EK9 Civic Type R and then X. So the Civic Type R, was first introduced in 97, after kind of the success of like the Integra Type R and the NSXR. They kind of went right ahead and made a Civic variant. And, so a lot of people know about the Civic Type Rs. These are, if you're like a Honda guy, you definitely know about this car.
Oh, yeah.
So for all the non-Honda guys, like the typical Honda in the late 90s, this came with a B series power plant, the B16B to be specific, and not a major horsepower thrower like some of these other cars. This is definitely the lowest horsepower car on the list.
High rever.
Yeah, high.
I don't know. The Corolla might be.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I don't
fighting
even
that for low
consider that.
horsepower.
You put So, but supposedly coming from the factory with 182 horsepower. It's not that car. It's not this high horsepower car. What it is a high handling car, and that's what Honda definitely went after with all these R cars. And
Balance.
Right, exactly. And beyond, of course, some of these interior upgrades from a standard Civic, like the Recaros and all the red door cards and upgraded stereo and all that. We're talking a lot of chassis rigidity. They put in a lot of extra little welds, a lot of extra little braces in order to keep the chassis rigid around those corners.
Oh, yeah.
And that was really, kind of the claim to fame with the Civic Type R was just how quick it would get around those tracks. There was two different, like, I don't want to say body styles, but 97 and 98 were like Gen 1, and Gen 2 was 98 to 2000, which was or 99 to 2000, which, pretty much you just saw an upgraded front bumper and headlights.
They were so quick to make facelifts back then.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Like the generations were so small, it was like
they were trying to keep attention or trying to keep that, but like didn't even necessarily need to yet.
Right.
Like people were just getting used to the 96 and 97, and then all of a sudden, 98 or whatever, and it's like, oh shit, okay, yeah, cool, and right, that was the thing. And so when we're talking about at the beginning where I said the Type X or Type RX, that was their only like sub model was the RX, and that was only in 99 and 2000. And so I just so happened to have a 99 Civic Type RX, and if you listen to an earlier episode, you would hear me kind of talking about that. And basically the difference was just a little bit more fancy, you could say. The RX had an actual CD player instead of, tape player or block-off plate. The electric mirrors, power windows, air conditioning, all that type of stuff. The RX was the final model, they said, and then that's when the EK9, in 2000, it was the last EK9. So, overall, this car is on the list because it's definitely iconic, and it was kind of part of that really definitive Honda racing period when they were really dedicated to these models and making sure that they had cars that would perform, not just speed wise.
Right. It's hard to hate on the EK9 Type R. Whether you're a Nissan guy, Mazda guy, whatever, you can't. It's hard to hate on it.
Yeah,
it's one of just those iconic cars that you can't touch.
You got to have respect for it. Like if you're a car guy, it's like any of these cars on this list for the most part. It's not saying that every car guy loves, an AE86 or an R33 GTR, but just about most car guys, especially import car guys, can just respect these cars because they have a place in the culture and in the history.
Right.
Yeah. So number 6 was the EK9 Civic Type R. Number 5, halfway through the list here, the R32 GTR, and this one's I'm throwing it back to you.
Oh yeah, this is my favorite Skyline is the R32. So they had lots of different sub models. They had the GTR, which is, I think this is the first generation of that. The GTR with the RB26, and the one kind of designed for racing.
This is the R32 is the record breaker. The R32 is the explosion that Nissan needed to really get their name on the racing circuit.
Yeah, and if it weren't for the R32 GTR, there wouldn't be a 33, 34. It all started with this one, and it was really dominated in the early 90s in the Japanese and Australian touring car championships, and it dominated so much it was actually banned from the Australian touring car championship because it was so dominant. They changed the rules to where it was kind of ruled out.
Wow.
And that's actually where the name Godzilla came from, was Australia, not Japan like most people think.
Yeah, I think Australia is kind of underrated in their involvement in
100%.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of stuff that happened in Australia that people might not realize.
Or they just associated with Japan just because that was the dominant place for them.
Right. But yeah, they had a few different variants of that. They had the GTR. They also had the GTST, which was the rear wheel drive only. Still had the turbo engine, but it was the RB20, so it was a 2-liter rather than a 2.6. They also had a few other NA models that were, I don't know, not really worth talking about, I guess.
Right,
just basic,
your base cars, yeah.
But yeah, the top model though was the GTR V-Spec 2 in 1, and they only made about 63 units of those. So you'll never see those pretty much. If you do, you better pinch yourself, take a
Right.
picture,
Yeah.
find the guy, talk to him, because you might not ever see one again, because most of those went to the racetrack because, like I said, this was the time where all these motorsports they were really stepping it up for the motorsports. And, they were designing things specifically to take to the track. And they were doing things, they were making these models, with so many units to sell, like I said earlier, to, qualify for the homologation, because they had to sell so many units to be legal for the racing.
Right.
So that created, like, some of these crazy street cars that you could technically buy, but, they're so far and few between that good luck finding them.
Right. Yeah, you're a collector.
Even
or
back
somebody
then,
that-
you had to be like a race team to even think about getting one.
They're
probably.
not. They're probably not even offering it to sell you or me, even if we had this ungodly amount of money.
You had to know someone.
Yeah, you would have had to pay off the guy that paid off the guy that helped you get on the list.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, those type of things back then, they were really into it. It was almost like they realized, wow, this racing thing is like really, really a thing. And if we can invest some money into it, we could see more sales based on the followers of those race series and all of that. Yeah, I think it worked for them too.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I mean, also another cool model, I keep saying Autech. They also had an Autech R32. It was also a sedan like the R33. However, it only had an NA RB26.
Figures.
So, I mean, that was still cool. It still has the ITBs and stuff like that, but also has an automatic transmission. Like,
Yeah.
come on.
Weird choice. Like, that guy was funny.
Super weird. I'm like, come on. You were so close to having something so cool.
Yeah, like.
But, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's still cool. I would still rock one, but.
Yeah, it's not a race car, that's for sure.
Right. But, yeah, man, the R32, like, that's the one for me. It's the most iconic in my book in that sense, because if it weren't for it, there wouldn't be what followed.
Right. Yeah, it was the gateway. The R32 was the gateway drug to all of the the successors. So number 5, R32 GTR. All right, here we go. Now we get into these top 4. And these top 4 are some of the obvious iconic Japanese cars that 9 out of 10 guys have heard of, even if you're not into import cars. So we're going to run through them. We won't get too crazy because, of course, we could talk all day about these 4 cars and, all of the spectacular accomplishments that they've achieved, even 10, 15, 20 years after their production, they still have, kind of kept these top ranks, which, you can't really beat them out. So number 4, of course, the MK4 Supra, obviously, made popular through its debut in the first Fast and the Furious, being one of the hero
Supra
cars. Yeah, that I think started off a long obsession for some people with that car. Just and then obviously realizing where that engine, the 2JZ GTE, is just bulletproof, in that you can strap on a big spoolie boy and get your major horsepower without having to build the block.
Yeah, it's crazy. They were doing crazy power with those
so long ago, before even a lot of the newer electronics and everything that you can use. They were using it with what they had and getting a ton of power out of them.
Yeah, it was insane. There's not many engines out there that have such a following like the 2JZ. Like, people put those in everything.
Oh,
that's just one of those engines that, like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to 2J swap this.
Yeah, and there's
like,
hardly any left because of that. It's like they literally just like stripped them out, and then when you pair that, and this is what people found is the ultimate pairing, which, comparatively, when we're talking about the 6 speeds versus the 5 speeds, this was actually different, because there was a W58 5-speed, which was like, all right. It was good. It was usually on the NA model,
Right.
and it's still a good transmission. But then you had the V16 Git Rag, and that was like the tranny. Like, if you can get your hands on a V16, then you're good. You got the build going. Like, you wanted that 6-speed for the Supra, and that's something I find a little unique as far as, whatever the Git Rag's doing that's different than the Evos or the S15, SR20, like whatever they're doing different works, because those things are handling 1,200 horsepower.
Right, and they're in a lot, like Git-Rag transmissions are in a lot of other cars you might not even realize.
Right.
And they supplied transmissions for a lot of these, late 90s Japanese cars that
yeah, because the R34 also had a Git
R34 as
Rag.
well, yeah.
Which, right, I mean, it makes sense. They obviously know what they're doing. And so with the Supra, as everybody knows, there's the turbo and NA model. There was also a model with the removable top, the Targa top.
Targa, yeah.
Yeah, and as we all remember in Fast and the Furious, Brian just whips off the Targa, lets it fly down the California Pacific Coast Highway or whatever, just see ya. Like, that's not some super valuable piece for that car, because now if it starts raining, you're screwed.
Right.
So, but we all remember that, and I think that was pretty iconic way of them, like, showing that the car was actually a Targa top.
Right.
And I always remember that because, of course, back in the day, like, our parents had T-top whatevers, and so I always thought that was kind of a cool part that they did. But when we are talking about all these cars, these 90s cars, we're talking about weight. And so the Supra, of course, at 3,500 pounds, was one of the heavier cars on this list.
Right.
So although you have like this sweet, 6-cylinder twin turbo motor, you also have 3,500 pounds that you got to motivate. And that's a lot, compared to maybe that 2,500 pound Civic we were just talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it needs the twin turbo, and the Civic only needs a 1.6.
Right. And so, wrapping up the Supra, we have a friend, Hartsock, who has a Supra that was originally an NA that he converted to an NAT, and he's got, on his high tune over 1,000 horsepower.
Yeah, I think he has a GT42 turbo or something like that.
Some big shiny fucking.
Yeah.
It's for sure. Yeah, it's like you open the hood and you're like, okay.
I keep trying to get him to launch it for me, dude. And he's like, you want to help me replace the transmission?
Yeah,
I'm like, no.
Shit. or peel the rear end out of a telephone pole. Like,
right.
Yeah, I mean, so we're going to have him on a later episode. And there is, around these Supras, there is, a little thing where the left hand and the right hand drive Supras have a clear price difference, like a clear, like, demand right hand drive versus left hand drive. And it's one of the few, when we talk about the RX-7, right, there's not the same thing. Like, both the left and the right hand drive versions are both equally as expensive, but for some reason the left hand drive Supras are $20,000 more than a right-hand drive Supra.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, was it because they didn't import as many?
I'm not sure, but that's something we'll talk about with Hartsock and see if we can get to the bottom of why guys like him with a left-hand drive Supra look down on right-hand drive Supras. Like, it's an interesting thing, right?
It's also pretty crazy that, another difference between the American and the Japanese one is the American has 320 horsepower stock. The Japanese has, quote, 276.
Yeah,
stock,
they all do. That is interesting how that works, and what would what would be the process of getting it to be the same as the American without adding aftermarket parts? Is it just a tune? Did they detune?
It's just a number.
Right. They are actually both the exact same.
Right.
Yeah.
Most likely. I mean, I'm sure there are a few small differences, but the whole gentleman's agreement and
Right.
all
Yeah.
that
It
with
makes
Japan.
sense. Yeah.
Right.
So number 4, the MK4 Supra, and number 3 coming in, which we just mentioned, is the RX-7.
Ooh.
Yeah, the FD3S, as the model was called in Japan. So these were 92 to 97, and then another version from 97 to 2002.
It's crazy. That's
It's a long time.
2002, yeah.
Yeah, but low production numbers, total over 10 years, 68,000 produced, and so we're talking, on average 6,800 a year. That's not
it's
shit.
not many at all.
So that's why they're pretty rare. Anybody that knows RX-7s knows the infamous 13B. That's the twin turbo, twin rotor motor in, of course, the turbo RX-7s, and those came with a 5-speed manual. And when we're talking about weight, this car weighs 2,600 pounds. That's 1,000 pounds less than a Toyota Supra.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that.
You wouldn't, but I mean,
yeah.
kind of. You just look at the car, and it's like not nearly as much of a boat as the Supra, not nearly as much like just hardware.
Right, but also, an inline 6
versus
a 1.3 that's the size of a shoebox.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
there's so much room in the engine bay of those. If you take out a couple things, you're like, holy cow, there's barely an engine in this.
And so, when you were talking about homologation, or is that how you homologation? Yeah. So the RX-7 wasn't available in Australia until '95, and they specifically did that to get the homologation.
Homologation.
The homologation in the Australian GT series. So
right.
after that, the numbers were selling in Australia, and they realized it was something that they needed to do. So, the RX-7, although a lot of people obviously will complain about the rotary engine, it is something very unique. And then when you strap those 2 turbos on there and listen to that bitch sing, it is just like...
It's crazy.
Yes, it's crazy because it's high revving too, so it's just like screaming at you in this like raspy kind of like voice, and you're just like, what do you want?
Right. Like one car moment that I've had that I'll always remember was my buddy Andrew had got an FDRX7 right-hand drive. Long story short, he traded a Civic for it.
Wow.
Yeah. Driving that through the airport tunnel in Nashville.
Oh yeah, that's the best. My gosh, that airport tunnel is awesome.
Second, third, fourth, full pull through it, and just hearing that thing sing, with a straight pipe, open exhaust, just screaming, dude. It was
I can imagine.
Such a cool sound.
Yeah,
I'll never forget it.
Not long, but you never forget those through that tunnel, man.
When it's like popping when you're shifting. Oh, yeah, so cool.
And so they had a lot of different little models, here and there. But definitely the most iconic and probably the most desired was the Spirit R. And this was limited to 1,500 units. And pretty much all the other special cars that they had, the Type A, the Type B, the Type RZ, all of these different ones were pretty much all blended together to create a Type A Spirit R, and it's in Mazda called it the Ultimate RX-7. And so this car just pretty much was their consideration of the final RX-7 and what they considered it to be the most perfect one.
Yeah, and they hit it.
Yeah, for sure. It's
a
beautiful car. Like by the time 2000, the year 2000, 2002 came around, like there was a lot of advancements in electronics and in just interior styling, and the that final Spirit R really brought all of that together.
Another one of those cars that you could put on a showroom today, and
Yeah,
other than the pop-up
works.
headlights,
Yeah, if you
I
had the
mean-
kit to put it to the standard headlights, yeah,
Right.
it would literally hang.
right. I mean, I like the pop-ups. I think
Me
it looks
too.
cool. And the later model had those bigger indicator lights up front that kind of, I don't know, made it flow nice.
Yeah,
It looked real cool.
is a really and this is again another one of those cars that was really exposed to the masses by Fast and the Furious, the first
Oh yeah, Dom's.
RX-7. Like, you'd never heard, like, when he pulls into their little gathering before the street race in that industrial area, and he comes in and just whips the accelerator like
Which
yeah,
I don't know if
it
that
was
was
even
really
an
a rotary.
RX-7. Yeah, I know.
I think it was a 2JZ, but
It probably was, but like,
still.
it was just so dramatic, and he's in this car that like you hadn't really seen,
Right,
because
right.
if you saw them, they were probably just base models being driven around,
Right.
in the 90s, right? Like,
Right.
a lot of those touring editions and whatnot, were pulled up by enthusiasts or autocross guys. So like,
Right, yeah. Definitely.
but I think Fast and the Furious really helped with this car too.
The movie helped a lot with a lot of cars.
With a lot of cars. But so number 3, the RX-7, specifically the Spirit R, the final edition. And so one car, that didn't really get helped by the first Fast and the Furious that's on our list is the next one, and that's the NSX-R. The NSX was not in the first Fast and the Furious, which was probably, it was, but in the background,
Right.
like, it wasn't a featured car, and so the NSX-R for me is definitely an iconic car, and I think it is for a lot of guys, even non-Honda guys, because the NSX car was the car that Honda purpose-built to beat track records. Like, they built that car to be the track monster. And so
That was their answer to the Skylines and the
exactly that.
all those other cars, the Supra, the RX-7, all that.
And so instead of going, for the same thing that everybody else was going for, which was more power, the 276 or whatever, 276, but really 340, whatever. Honda really stayed to their NA roots, and again, just like the Civic Type R, went for chassis rigidity. They went for handling. They went for all of the things that bring you through the corner. Besides that extra power, they felt that they didn't really need that. And of course, NSX-R means NSX Type R, right? And so they really, really wanted to beat these records that the R32 GTR and the R33 GTR were creating at Nürburgring and the different tracks. And I think that they did it. There was only 483 NSX-Rs.
Yeah, that's not many.
That's
at all.
not many at all. I recently saw one for sale. They didn't even post the price, and it was sold 2 minutes. That's a car that does qualify for show and display because of that low production amount.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you don't see. Well, I guess not surprised since there's so less.
There's
of
so
them,
few of them that, like, obviously they started the NSX-R in 92, so those things have been federally legal for a minute, but you still aren't seeing
I didn't
them.
realize that either.
Yeah, you're not seeing them because there was so few created, right? And so, as the NSX, that first generation, went through, they came out with Type S and, the multiple different little kind of submodels. And as it went on, it became more of a quote-unquote exotic instead of like a, You know, like none of these cars had been considered exotic except for
Right.
the NSXR because of its mid-engine layout.
Right.
And that was something that really took it away from the Supra and the GTRs and these other cars on this list was its engine placement and how like bold that was for Honda in
Right.
the early 90s to go from a front engine company and make a mid-engine car.
Right. They don't have anything else like that. Haven't made anything like
No.
it since.
No, they haven't. I mean, besides the new generation NSX, that's like it, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
But right, like they never did another model. And so as a lot of Honda guys know, that that car was, a 6-cylinder that, is the C30, a 3.0 6-cylinder non-turbo. And so that was also kind of out of Honda's kind of general aim. It was typically 4 cylinders. But this still did include VTEC, which if you've ever ridden an NSX, I mean the 3.0 with the VTEC is sick. Like it's definitely a good ride. I mean, could it use maybe a turbo or two?
Right.
Yeah, but like when we're talking all NA, I mean the car is like a beast.
Right. That never was Honda's thing to just throw a turbo on something.
No, they really strayed away from that as much as they could. So number 2 on our list, the Honda NSXR, which brings us to our final number 1 car, which everybody knows. It hasn't been said. We know what it's going to be.
Yeah, everyone knows.
Everyone knows, but and this isn't like this is just straight up because the car is so well-rounded.
Right.
What is it?
The Mazda Miata.
Yes, the Mazda Miata.
Just kidding.
Hot dog edition.
Come on. No, you guys know it's the R34.
The
Because
R34.
who can beat that thing, man? That thing is. You can't. You can't beat the R34 as far as styling, performance, any of that was coming out of Japan at that time. The R34 is the top. Like, there's nothing better. It's the last generation of what I consider real Skylines. Because after that, there is nothing. There's
Right.
the R35, obviously.
That's
but
different. It's a whole
not even a
different
Skyline.
thing. Yeah.
That's a GTR.
That's a GTR. Yeah, you're right.
And it was made famous. Well, for me, it was made famous through, the video games like Gran Turismo, and also seeing it on Too Fast, Too Furious.
Too fast. Yeah.
It was Brian's car in that famous silver and blue livery.
Yeah, no, and that's where I definitely first really saw it, especially with modifications and like presented in that way.
Right, yeah. For Americans, I'm sure a lot of them, that was the first time they saw an R34.
Right, and it wasn't even, and it was just an R34. It wasn't even one of the like amazing ones.
Right.
Which is crazy to think, right?
Yeah. And it was pretty high tech for the day. It had the multi-function display,
Yeah.
which, had all your gauges, your boost gauge, EGT, water temp, oil temp, everything from the factory right there. And that little screen is just so cool for back then.
For back then. And a lot of people, just thought that started coming on the R35s, but that was actually inspired by the R34.
Right.
It was just an upgraded version.
Yeah, and that was so cool, just seeing that. And I even think they have clips of that in the Too Fast, Too Furious. Like they,
for sure. It shows
they
it.
pan over to it, So that's one of my favorite things about that car is that, and they came with the, like we said before, the Getrag 6-speed. That was really the main upgrade from the 33 was the transmission being a 6-speed.
Yeah.
And it still had pretty much the same RB26 that came in the 33 and the 32 that, at that point they've had it well developed and worked out any kinks, know it inside and out. So it was a really, real solid drivetrain. And that's what made it, kind of dominate. And that's what helped it break all these records and, kind of continue
to be
the
like,
dominance of the Skylines.
like the number 1 car, period, right? That's how it became number one on the list, was all of that extra effort and attention to detail that Nissan really picked up over those years, from the first R32 concept to, you know, this highest model of the R34. They gained all that experience and really just like narrowed and honed in on the R34.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and they're still doing it. You know, they're still developing, you know, parts lines and stuff for that with Nismo.
Oh yeah, they know that
And doing the
the
restoring.
R34 is like their gem. They know that up in the headquarters somewhere. They're
Right.
like, we got to still support this because it's creating a whole culture around this car, pretty
yeah.
much. It's without them even necessarily trying for that.
Right.
It just kind of happened and they're rolling with it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, you know, on a car that's becoming 25 years old.
Old as
That's
fuck.
That's old, man.
Like, think like when, 25 years old. You're hard to find, besides cars on these lists, you're hard to find 25-year-old cars that still have a following
Right.
and have a following of younger people. Like,
Right.
you know, sure, like, you know, the AE86, there's a bunch of us, like, older guys that are like, yeah, the AE86, yeah. But listen, the younger kids, 20-year-olds right now, don't fucking care or know about an AE86, but I damn well guarantee they know what an R34 is.
Right.
You know, so this car is just a whole different thing. It's just a
Right,
whole
right.
different thing.
And dude, the Nismo Z-Tune,
Yeah.
like,
Right. And
crazy.
and when we're talking about some of these sub models, you know, like with the R33, the 400R, or we didn't even mention, you know, with the Supra, the 3000 GT,
Right.
the Z-Tune puts all of those right to just bed, just
Right.
to bed.
You
Like,
know, and it it has more aggressive suspension. Obviously, they're gonna upgrade that. You know, has the bigger Brembo brakes, which why not? They're gonna put those. They're gonna upgrade the brakes, obviously. And the aero on the car was actually inspired from the GT500 race cars.
oh
you know,
yeah,
that
you
were
can tell it just looks so bad.
Right. Right.
Yeah, like in a good way, like good bad.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
dude, it's
You see that and
insane.
you're like, holy
Right, the
shit.
hood and like the way the fenders come up and
Yeah.
you know have the vents on the back.
Everybody
side.
tries to make their R34 GTT look like a Z-Tune.
Dude, right?
It's like
Yeah, they're like, all right, I can get a GTT with a Z-Tune kit or a GTR and not a Z-Tune kit.
hey, so where's the paperwork on the GTT anyway?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't call me out like that.
like the R34 GTR, definitely the king of 90s sports cars. There's no,
Yeah.
you know, and really, I mean, there's not much after it that has even competed with it. You know, the last production date of a GTR, I believe, was in 2002 or 2001.
Yeah, believe so.
Yeah, so you know, we're solid, as we said, 20 years later, and like
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time finding a car that is like more desirable than that when we're talking about, you know, Japanese cars.
Right.
Yeah.
There's nothing else.
So that right there is our top 10. It doesn't mean it's your top 10. Doesn't mean it's anyone else's top 10. It's just ours. And, you know, we just kind of wanted to get it out there. And if you have any info to add or, you know, any rebuttals on something that we said, just comment, write us something, let us know so we can kind of take that into consideration because, you know, we're just two guys giving our opinions on
Yeah.
JDM cars.
We're just
right?
two guys.
We're just two guys living the right
Love
hand drive
Japanese
life.
cars, yeah.
You know, so for this episode, we're good. Make sure that you subscribe, follow us on the gram at RHD GUYS, and until next time, we're out of here.
See ya.